I'm Jim Inkster, and the governor of Louisiana is at your service. This is his 13th Ask the Governor show, and if you would like to participate, the number again is 877 217 5757. 10 days ago, the governor opened the regular legislative session with an ambitious tax proposal, and he's looking over some numbers right now. How's it looking?
Well, Jim, it's still early, and I had a number of meetings yesterday with individual legislators and leadership in both the House and the Senate, and trying to figure out what comes together on their end. Of course, I have a plan that I put before the legislature. I spoke about it last Monday on the opening day. Uh, as of right now, it remains the only plan that addresses the fiscal cliff that we hit on July 1st, 2018, which is $1.3 billion with the revenue that just falls off the books. But it also addresses next fiscal year where we have a $440 million shortfall in a way that allows us to fully fund TOPS, protect our most critical priorities. So that's the only plan that's on the floor right now. And obviously, I'm pushing the legislature hard to accept the plan, or at least offering up an alternative. And that second part certainly hasn't happened yet.
It would seem there has to be some sort of compromise because you're in a party that's a minority party. And Republicans, if they want anything to happen, they're probably going to have some Democrats go along with them.
Well, that's the nature of the game because structural fixes to the state require a two-thirds vote
In both chambers.
in both chambers, and so you can only get that with Democrats and Republicans. And so, if we're going to fix the problem, there has to be compromise, and there has to be some level of consensus. And you're never going to get to 100%. But being Louisianans first and foremost, and not Republicans and Democrats, I think is the way to go forward. Compromise absolutely is not a dirty word. I'm certainly open to it, and have that's one of the reasons that I continue to meet and to have conversations with legislators, both in the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat, and I'm optimistic that we're going to come together and solve our problems. Now, one of the challenges is that I don't detect a sense of urgency among a lot of legislators because the fiscal cliff, $1.3 billion, is July 1st, 2018. The reason now is the time to fix it. This is the last scheduled fiscal session between now and then.
Right.
So if we don't fix it, we're going to come into one or more special sessions where the options won't be any better than what we have right now. And it's just time that we stabilize our state and put ourselves on a path forward to greater prosperity for all. But that requires some hard decisions. Jim, I would much rather be the governor of a state of the state of Louisiana before you today, talking about a surplus that we had and how we were going to invest the surplus and reduce taxes. That just happens to not be the situation that we're in, unfortunately. And we're going to have to make some bold and courageous decisions that are hard, but that are necessary.
Your number again is 877 217 5757. We will go to the phone lines in short order. The principal plank in your tax plan is this commercial activity tax. How did you arrive at that proposal as the best way to go?
Well, that was a lot of conversations with legislators as too, and those conversations were before, during, and after the special session that we had this year. When I'm trying to figure out what we can put together that will work, that makes sense, and many legislators, again, Republican and Democrat, told me they were against. First of all, they want the penny of sales tax to roll off when it's scheduled to roll off, June 30th of 2018. That's the biggest part of the problem. That's an $880 million loss of revenue in and of itself. But that they didn't want to do anything to require individuals to pay more, either through an individual income tax or sales tax, until corporations started paying their fair share. The fact of the matter is 80% of the corporations in our state are not paying any income tax. If you look at the revenue mix for the state, about 39% comes from the individual income tax, 39% comes from the sales tax, 3% comes from the corporate income and the corporate franchise tax combined. So that leg of the stool has become just too short. And to restore balance and fairness to the system, we came up with the MCAT, the commercial activity tax, I should say, which is basically going to function as an alternative minimum tax. so that we can bring some of these corporations onto the tax rolls and have them pay their fair share.
Once again, 877-217-5757. Let's start with James in Longview, Texas. Good afternoon, James. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Oh, hi there, Jim, and hello, Governor Edwards. I had a question that kind of pertains to the topic you've been talking about, the commercial activities tax you propose versus franchise tax. I'm just wondering, you've kind of laid out how your plan might work. I'm just wondering, does it have any special virtues? And I just had one hypothetical, and bear in mind it's not my occupation, but suppose somebody in Louisiana buys some topsoil in Texas. They come to Texas and pay for it, pay for the truck driver and all that, and he just drives 5 miles into Louisiana, drops his load 30 seconds later. Will he pay a activities tax since he's quote-unquote doing a little bit of work in Louisiana, although paid the rest of it in Texas?
Well, if he's going to be generating receipts in Louisiana, and if he's subject to the corporate income tax, yes, he would. But if that's all he did, the tax would be absolutely minimal. And of course whether he's structured as a flow-through entity, let's say it's a partnership or an LLC. The tax would be very, very minimal, if anything, and then it would only be if he had receipts that were considerable and taxed as a corporation before we would ever get to the 0.35% of the taxable gross receipts. For example, if the taxable gross receipts, even if he's a corporation, are less than $500,000, the total tax due is $250 for the year. 500,000 to $1 million, it would be $500. $1 million to $1.5 million, it'd be $750. More than $1.5 million, it'd be 0.35% of the taxable gross receipts. And so, it's hard to answer your question, the hypothetical, without knowing an awful lot more about it. But I do appreciate you calling in, James, with the question.
And you're listening to Ask the Governor. Michelle Southern's producing. Your number 877-217-5757. And let's go right back to the phones. Here's David in New Orleans. David, good afternoon. You're on with Governor John Bell Edwards. Hi, David. Okay, let's try Billy in Covington. Billy, you are on Ask the Governor. Hi, Billy.
Hi, this is Billy.
Yes.
Hello. Yes, I had a question concerning the film industry. Back when I moved here several years ago, everywhere I went, it seemed like I was always running into a film crew somewhere, and I knew lots of people that worked in the industry in various positions, and now suddenly it seems to have dried up, and I know that something changed with the tax structure. I don't really know exactly what that was, but I'm wondering if we're going to do anything to bring them back, because we're losing people to California. They're going to Georgia now, and it's a shame because I think we have a lot of talent, particularly here in where I am, in the North Shore and in the New Orleans area. Is there anything we can do, Governor?
Billy, first of all, thank you for calling in with the question. In 2015, a cap was put on the motion picture investor tax credit. The cap was put in at $180 million. That was the first time that the program had been capped, and it was a back-end cap, meaning we weren't going to pay out more than $180 million in a year, although we would certify more credits than that potentially in a year. Now, that caused some issues with the industry. They became concerned that we weren't committed long-term to that tax credit program and to that industry. It wasn't the cap in and of itself that caused the problem. It was just the fact that we changed the program, because I believe that the most we had ever paid out in any given year before we put the $180 million cap was $184 million. But the change caused some concerns with the industry, and I think if we move forward with stability in the program, and for example, there are some changes to the program this year, but not on the cap itself. It's my understanding that J.P. Morrell will have a bill. He is the senator from New Orleans and the chair of Revenue and Fisk in the Senate, and he's going to have a bill that leaves the cap where it is, but tries to generate more of a return on investment on the dollars that we are going to be spending on that program by making sure that we have more permanent employees that result from the program, that there's more Louisiana-based industry there, and reduces the amount per project. Right now, I think a big blockbuster film, for example, might can draw down as much as $30 million. I think that would get reduced to $20 million. And so all the effort is trying to make sure we're getting a better return on investment. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to see stability and predictability. And we are already seeing some new activity in motion pictures and in television. And be honest with you, television series are better for the state and for local entities than the movies in many ways, because the movies come and then they're gone. The television series, if they come and start filming here, they stay here for, if they're successful at least, they'll stay here for several years, several seasons. And so I think you're going to see some positive developments around the industry.
Let's try to get David again. David in New Orleans, you're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards. Hi, David.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you doing, Mr. Governor?
I'm doing fine, David. Thank you for calling.
Now, I'm a junior at LSU, and I've got my job out of college already. I've got a 3.5 GPA, and I think the one issue I see with the TOPS program is it's too forgiving. I think that the GPA requirement overall needs to be up to retain the TOPS money for the high-performing students. And unfortunately, it's not heartless, but sometimes you can't. If the program's losing money, it can't afford to give everybody TOPS. I think that's an issue that needs to be seriously looked at, and I'm sure you guys have.
David, first of all, thank you for calling. I have a daughter who, like you, is a junior at LSU. She's also a TOPS recipient. TOPS started as a program to really benefit low-income individuals who needed help going to college, and I think that's why the requirements were set as they are. As you probably know, a 2.5 grade point average and a 20 on the ACT qualifies you for TOPS at our four-year institutions. And then the program grew so that it was no longer limited to individuals who were low income, but the standards didn't change. And really, that wasn't so much the problem. The problem was we went about 7 straight years where we led the nation in state general fund cuts to higher education. We replaced much, but not all of that money with tuition increases. The tuition increases also led the nation for that period of time. And every time you increase tuition in Louisiana, you're increasing the TOPS program. So the TOPS program went from $60 million at its inception to about $300 million now, which is a very, very expensive program. I believe we are obligated to fund it. I put forward a plan last year that would have fully funded it. The legislature opted not to do that. I put forth a plan this year that will fully fund TOPS, and I'm working with the legislature to get them to do it. If we make changes to TOPS, it ought to be changes that apply to kids who are not at school yet. I'm sorry, and not in college yet, because we've made commitments to individuals who are already in college, and quite frankly, there are a couple of bills that I know of that would increase the grade point average. I believe that you would have to have to qualify for TOPS going forward. And I've got to look at the bills more carefully. I'm not sure whether they would change the requirements for high school seniors this year or whether it would be further down the line before the changes kicked in. I can tell you that'll be hotly debated in the legislature.
Randy in Baton Rouge. Randy, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Thank you much, Jim. And Governor, thanks so much for your program and the opportunity that you give us to come speak to you. I'm actually sitting on the interstate right now like virtually every other Baton Rougean does, virtually every other day, sitting and not moving. And I just would love an update on where we're at with infrastructure changes, not just across the state, but especially here in the capital city, a city with 500,000 people, and the traffic is just incredible. What can we do about it?
Randy, thank you for the call. I just came through the traffic myself to get to the studio, and it is a problem that's way past time to fix. We are causing problems for ourselves in terms of our ability to attract economic investment to create jobs. We're creating problems as it relates to quality of life. I don't know whether you're going to play golf or going to work or whatever, but whatever it is, you don't want to sit in that interstate. And let me tell you, we've got a gas tax that is almost 3 decades old at 16 cents a gallon. And this is the problem. The 16 cents is worth 7.5 cents today because of what inflation has done to it. And the purchasing power of the gas tax is 7.5 cents relative to what it was. And you simply cannot maintain and preserve your existing infrastructure, much less add the new capacity that you need to meet the demands of growth when you have an erosion of your purchasing power like that. If we are going to move forward, we have to do what the Transportation Infrastructure Task Force recommended, and we got to figure out a better way to identify the infrastructure that is most important, both in terms of preservation and maintenance on the one hand, but also new capacity on the other, and you got to have a way to pay for it because we can't just sit back and wait. And Randy, one of the things that troubles me most, at a time when we are having state general fund issues and our budget constraints, we're having to put $40 million of general fund into the Transportation Trust Fund just to draw down the available federal Transportation Trust Fund dollars this year because all of those federal dollars require a non-federal match. And we're not generating enough revenue from the existing gas tax to bring our own federal taxes back to Louisiana. And that's before President Trump and Congress ever get around to this $1 trillion over 10-year infrastructure initiative, all of which is going to have a higher non-federal match. And so we will be leaving those dollars on the table too. We can't afford to do it. There are bills in the legislature right now that would increase the gas tax, limit the way that the money has to be used so that it does go into preservation, maintenance, and capacity, roads and bridges and airports and those things, and make sure that we get good projects in exchange for that. And I'm hopeful that the legislature will take that seriously. We're never going to move forward if we keep getting that same 16 cents from 1989, I think it was.
Eric in New Orleans. Thank you, Randy. Eric, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. My name's Eric, and I'm from New Orleans. And we have a situation here where it looks like it is the case that the Confederate monuments are going to come down. And there's a lot of people on both sides of that issue, and they're talking about taking them down at the cover of night. And some people think that's great. Some people think that's awful. One thing that I haven't heard anything about is, not much about anyway, is what to put in their place. Now, what occurs to me is that at the time these are taken down, if we had already had a period of public comment and got some excitement about something positive to put in their place, let's say Homer Plessy in one of them at the top of City Park so that I don't see nothing when I get up there, that if at the time we took Beauregard down, there was an excited crowd who had chosen Plessy to put up, that would create a different dynamic at each of those removals. Instead of it just being about anger of people on either side of the issue, there would be a whole group of people who would be positively excited about what's going in its place. And I wonder if anyone's even considered that. Or
Eric, first of all, thank you for calling. I think that's a very reasonable suggestion. I don't know whether anyone's considered it, and the reason I don't know is this is an issue for the city of New Orleans, and it's an issue that was brought forward by the mayor. I know the council has weighed in, the citizens of New Orleans, and citizens from elsewhere around the state have weighed in, but all through the city, and so it's not been something we've been focused on at the state level, but you know, it does appear that they're going to move forward. And I think your suggestion is worthy of consideration, and I will pass that along myself, and I would encourage you to do that too. Call your city council person, both your district council person and the two at large, to share that idea because it might go a long way to helping diffuse that situation.
Now, there are some bills that are proposed in the legislature to prevent the removal of the monuments. Do you think this is something that will have any kind of momentum, or is it a distraction amid the budget concerns?
Well, you know, it remains to be seen, and I have not had a conversation. I think there are two of them, as best I can recall, and I haven't had a conversation with either author of the bills. Again, this is an issue for New Orleans, and I don't know that the state ought to be weighing in on the internal management of the city of New Orleans. and not just or other cities for different things either. But we're going to see what view the legislature takes towards the bills, and I do want to have that conversation with the authors, and to be honest with you, I haven't yet read the bills either to know exactly how they would work.
The mayor feels very strongly about this.
Well, yeah, he's made that pretty clear, and again, it's not in conversations with me because this is not something that involves the state. I'm saying that based on things that I've read in the paper and seen on TV and so forth, and I know that the city council did as well.
This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining us for Ask the Governor. There is still ample time, and I see a line open for the first time in a while to talk with the governor of Louisiana. The number is 877-217-5757, toll free. James in St. Tammany. Hi, James. You're on with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Hey, Governor. My name is James Rogers. I'm from St. Tammany Parish, and I was calling today to find out what we could do to get a better Democratic Party in the parish and throughout the state. Because I looked around and I just haven't been able to find any true contact to get together with other people with the same ideals and beliefs. And I work laying grass each day, and I get to talk to my customers, and I see that there's more and more people out there who really do have more democratic beliefs and liberal beliefs that they want to have seen out in Louisiana to help our state. And I was wondering what you thought about that.
Well, James, thank you for the call. I'm not sure what to tell you about St. Tammany Parish and doing that. I do know that every parish has a Democratic Party executive committee, and I would encourage you to reach out to those individuals. And I encourage everybody out there to get involved. To be honest with you, whether it's Democrat or whether it's Republican or even if you're an independent, but just get involved to shape our future. But James, my focus is on getting people right now, especially because of the challenges we have in Louisiana, is to be Louisianans first and not think of party first, but let's just think of ourselves as being Louisianans coming together to solve these challenges. But certainly, you should start with the Democratic Party Executive Committee, and I know that you can probably go online and figure out exactly who they are and where they are.
877-217-5757, and Governor Edwards, a few Republicans, maybe more than a few, have taken aim at you about the flood recovery. Do you think the criticism you've received has been warranted?
No, but not to say that everything's perfect, because it's not. And look, I understand the frustrations. I'm frustrated too. It takes too long to navigate the federal bureaucracy. But that is institutionalized at the federal level, whether it's FEMA, whether it's HUD, whether it's because of their internal guidelines or rules, or whether it's because of the Stafford Act that governs them, or there's too many hurdles to go over and hoops to go through. But the fact of the matter is, we were historically fast in submitting to Congress action plans for the two appropriations that we got, both of them. And HUD acknowledged that, and in fact, HUD was quick in approving those action plans. And we had a timeline initially where we were going to be into July before we had the full $1.6 billion available to us. That money became available to us, I think it was last week, when the line of credit actually got funded. And the line of credit got funded after the congressional oversight hearing, where I thought it was obviously a staged show from a partisan perspective, where members of Congress were complaining about the fact that we had not gotten money out that they had appropriated, even though HUD had not yet made the money available to us. But that didn't fit with the narrative that they were determined. So we have a lot of work to do. I was very pleased that Senator Cassidy and Senator Kennedy went to the White House and asked Mick Mulvaney, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, to make sure that the next appropriation coming out of Congress has a significant amount of additional assistance for our state. We still need $1 billion just on the homeowner piece, the housing recovery, and another $1 billion when it comes to infrastructure enhancements, when it comes to business and agriculture and so forth. And to see them go forward and have that conversation with Mr. Mulvaney, which is a conversation that I had with him several weeks ago as well. That's very gratifying because at the end of this month, there will be another continuing resolution. We need to have an appropriation in that. And quite frankly, Jim, that's one of the challenges. Congress isn't appropriating by regular budgets anymore. And continuing resolutions are not designed to fund anything in full. And unfortunately, that extends to disaster recovery assistance as well. And so we've gotten $1.6 billion thus far. We need about $2 billion more. And we're going to be successful. And we now have a program that's running. In fact, we're running the program. Over 14,000 homeowners that registered on the survey so far. And homeowners who sustained damage should go to restore.la.gov, restore.la.gov in order to take the survey and determine if they're eligible. The phone number is 866-735-2001, 866-735-2001. And we're moving forward and actually doing environmental reviews right now, which are a precondition to the ability to actually get money into people's homes and have the repair started.
877-217-5757. Ray in Baker. Ray, you're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards of Louisiana. Hi, Ray.
Hi, Governor. I was wondering what we could do to have an alert system to alert people when there is a flood. Since our last flood, so many people got caught at night, and I think we would have lost a whole lot less if more people were alerted.
Well, Ray, that's a good question. We do have alert systems, for example, for tornadoes. The wireless systems we have, and those have been used too often here in Louisiana recently because we've had too many tornadoes, but with great effect. And so we can try to talk to the National Weather Service about extending that to this situation. When it comes to flooding, I can tell you that with respect to the August flood, which is probably the one that impacted you, the flood waters really started on the 12th. On August the 10th, there was a forecast by the National Weather Service that said the rain would be from 5 to 8 inches, possibly as high as 10 inches in certain locations. The challenge was we got 20 to 30 inches throughout the whole region in just 48 hours. There's another challenge around flash flood warnings because once you know that you got a flash flood, the emergency response experts say you don't evacuate then because the most vulnerable place you can be is in your car on the road. And in fact, of the 13 fatalities in the August flooding, the single biggest cause of them was people in their cars being swept off roadways and they drowned in their cars. And so we have to be very, very careful with this, but it's always prudent to give people as much advance notice as possible. But in this case, the National Weather Service was just wrong. And I don't even mean that as a criticism. Man cannot always predict what Mother Nature is going to do, but the forecast was incorrect. And that forecast was put out, for example, by the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness on the 10th of August and stayed up. And the notices did go out, but it really caught everyone by surprise. And we are trying to figure out how we can improve as it relates to flooding and flash flooding, because typically you don't know you're going to get a flash flood until it happens. And at that point in time, people are most vulnerable if they're not in their homes, if they're in the cars trying to get somewhere else.
Now, this, as mentioned, has been a political component. There's a political component involved, and Republican Congressman Garrett Graves even offered to resign. He said if the federal government is the culprit for the state not having the money. Your response to Congressman Graves?
Well, I mean, I think it's silly to talk about resigning over something like that. The fact of the matter is when he made the statement, we didn't have the money. Now, I don't know exactly what he heard. What he said, I wasn't listening to the program that day. But for several weeks, he's made statements that we were sitting on money that was in the bank that we had access to, rather than helping people, and that was just not true. He was saying those things while the money was not there, And unfortunately, not only was it not true, it just wasn't helpful either, because he's adding to the frustration and the anxiety of homeowners needlessly, and making it harder to go to Congress and get the additional assistance that we need. So I'm not sure what his angle was or why he did it. It's unfortunate. And I offered to Garrett in Washington a couple of weeks ago to sit down with him and just show him everything we've had, give him the timeline. It's not something he was interested in doing.
Greg in Natchitoches. Hi, Greg. You're on Ask the Governor.
Yeah, good afternoon, Governor. First of all, I want to give you an early thanks for, I understand you're coming up to Northwestern to speak Monday afternoon, and I will be there for that. But what I want to talk about, my wife, Camille, is, of course, one of the lobbyists for women's equal pay, and I want you to talk about how the possible women's equal pay is going this year. I know it didn't quite make it through House Labor Committee last year, and one of those looks like it's got a brighter future this year.
Well, I will tell you, first of all, thank you, Greg, for the call. It's an important issue. We should all be embarrassed and offended that Louisiana is dead last in the country when it comes to paying women the same we pay men when they have the same experience, so forth, and doing similar jobs. No matter how it gets measured, we are dead last, and that's not acceptable. 66 cents on the dollar, 48 cents on the dollar for women of color. We need to fix that. We're going to do it this year.
This is Jim Inkster. Thanks for joining us. Still time to get in with Governor John Bel Edwards in our final segment with him, 877-217-5757. He'll be back next month, so if you don't get in this time, you'll have a chance to question him, I'm sure, in the days, weeks, and months to come. And this is his 13th Ask the Governor show. Greg in Natchitoches asked you about equal pay. What about minimum wage? Last year you fought a tough fight and lost. You're back again, hoping to get the minimum wage up to the state of Arkansas's level of $8.50.
Yeah, over $8.50 over 2 years, and I'm committed to doing that. Look, $7.25 in 2017 is not a meaningful wage, and we should do better by our people. And there's only 5 states left that don't have their own minimum wage now. We need to move forward. I will tell you that both the minimum wage and the equal pay are things that are wildly popular with the people in Louisiana. I mean, off the charts, Republicans and Democrats alike. And we really need to move forward. We have too many people who are living in poverty needlessly. For example, I was saying as we went off the air, right now, women of color on average are paid 48 cents on the dollar compared to what men make. And we have an awful lot of ladies who are heading up households with one or more kids. And those kids are needlessly living in a level of poverty that we just shouldn't have. And we need to do something about it. The equal pay bill came out of the Senate last year, did not come out of the House. And I believe we have a much better effort this year. I think there's been a lot more education, and the approach has been refined so that I think it will generate less opposition, and hopefully we can succeed on both the minimum wage and on equal pay.
This is a different David in New Orleans calling the governor. David, you're on with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Good afternoon, Governor Edwards. I'm calling because I heard your response to the gentleman in St. Tammany Parish earlier, and it kind of caught me off guard. I was expecting for him to be encouraged a little bit more to go ahead and find a way to plug in with the Democratic Party there. But I guess I was most caught by your notion that we need to come together first as Louisianans at a time like this where the divisions are deep and over really powerful issues: women's enfranchisement, pay, the environment. All the major issues in the state are there's a lot of daylight between the two political persuasions on it. Do you see something that I'm not seeing? Is there one or two things you can think of that you can see Louisianans coming together on?
Sure. And look, we have our challenges, and unfortunately, I believe that to a greater degree than I certainly would like to see, Washington, D.C. style politics and mentality is taking root slowly but surely in Baton Rouge. But we're certainly not Washington, D.C. yet. And just yesterday, I had multiple meetings with Republicans and Democrats in leadership, individual members. We're still able to sit down and talk, and there's still agreement on a lot of things. For example, I think you're going to see us have broad agreement this year around criminal justice reform, which just a few years ago would have been impossible. But I believe that people now understand we're spending way too much money to incarcerate too many people for too long, and we're not safer as a result. And we can do better, and we can follow the example of other Southern conservative states so that we can pursue strategies that have been proven effective that aren't risky. And we're having good results on that. And there's another, a number of initiatives. I just talked about one with equal pay. Last year was a very bipartisan vote in support in the Senate. We need to extend that to the House, but we're having good conversations around that. And we have to be Louisianans first. And look, we can get back to being Republicans and Democrats when it's time to run again. And there's always going to be differences. There's a reason why somebody joins one party or the other. But if you just take the issues and have honest conversation, you'll find out that there's considerable overlap. And if you can just find the common ground and just build from there, we can be successful. But as soon as you stop having the conversations, that stops and we become Washington. And I don't want that to happen here.
Andrew in Zachary. Hello, Andrew. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards. Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Thank you, Governor Edwards, for taking my phone call. I was born and raised here in Louisiana. I've lived in Texas for about 8.5 years and just recently moved back. I know that you've got some plans in the works for updating the state income tax, but having lived in Texas for 8.5 years without having an income tax, that was definitely nice. One of the things I've noticed since moving here, the cost of living is just higher. The cost of my mortgage is higher. The cost of my automobile insurance is higher. The cost of my health insurance is higher. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on state income tax and ways to lower the cost of living here in the state of Louisiana.
Well, Andrew, first of all, thank you for your call, and I appreciate you coming back to Louisiana, and you're living in a great place in Zachary with one of the best school systems in the state. The one thing that is not higher is the property tax. The property tax in Texas is much, much higher than it is in Louisiana, and that really is the offset. The fact of the matter is that the combined state and local tax burden in Louisiana is about the third lowest in the country, and lower than Texas, primarily because of the property tax. Now, the plan that I put before the legislature, 90% of individuals would receive an income tax cut. And that's a big part of it because I want to take the rates, which are now 2%, 4%, and 6%, reduce them to 1%, 3%, and 5%. It's part of my effort to implement what the task force recommended that studied our tax and budget structure, where they say that when it comes to tax, the best policy is to broaden the base and lower the rates. So we would lower the rates, as I indicated, from 2%, 4%, and 6% to 1%, 3%, and 5%, and be able to do that by broadening the base, by getting rid of the deduction for federal tax liability, a deduction that only 3 other states have anyway. But we can be very, very competitive with a lower tax on individuals. We're also going to lower the sales tax by allowing that 5th penny to fall off, to go down to 4 cents, and that too would be a way to lower the rates while we expand the base, if we're successful there too, by modeling, after all places, Texas, the sales tax that they have in place in Texas on more services than we have in Louisiana. So those are some of the things that we are pursuing. But I would even if you don't own property in Texas, when you rent, you're paying your share of the property owner's property tax, and that really is the big difference between Texas and Louisiana as it relates to taxation.
Catherine in New Orleans. Hello, Catherine. You're on with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Governor, in New Orleans here, we're really aware of the Coastal Master Plan that's just been released, as I'm sure you are too. And I'm wondering what we can do to move our state towards more renewable sources of energy and reduce our dependence on oil and gas that's destroying our environment and threatening really our very livelihood.
Well, Catherine, the Coastal Master Plan is incredibly important. It will be presented to the legislature this year. There is a coastal plan that gets submitted every year, but every 5 years the master plan has to be resubmitted, and this is the 5th year. And the CPRA board, I think, met this week, or is going to meet this week, and approve it. It will be submitted to the legislature. That is our plan to invest, I should say, $50 billion over 50 years to make sure that we're protecting and restoring the coast in Louisiana. And I do believe that some of the restoration is required because of oil and gas exploration and production activities through, for example, the digging of canals and pipelines that allowed saltwater intrusion, that killed vegetation and allowed the erosion to happen at a much accelerated pace. But we're always, I shouldn't say always, but for the foreseeable future, we're going to be an oil and gas state. And you know, I'm going to do what I can to work with the industry to make sure that they stay in our state, that they stay profitable, but that they're good citizens and that they do things according to the law and regulation and permit requirements. That has not always been the case in the past, but going forward, there's not going to be that ultra cozy relationship between the Department of Natural Resources and the oil and gas industry that allowed that really to happen for decades. We're going to work with them. We want them to be profitable. We want them to hire plenty of Louisianans. But the fact of the matter is they have to be good citizens too. And the vast majority of them are. And much of what we're talking about, by the way, happened decades ago. Mm-hmm. And so even when you're sitting down with the oil and gas companies and you're talking to individuals, you're not talking to the individuals who were making decisions back when a lot of these things happened. And quite frankly, I don't think they understood what harm was going to be caused by much of their activities. But that harm is pretty obvious now. And so we're trying to make sure that we move forward in a way that promotes the industry, makes sure it stays here, stays profitable, but that we do it by balancing out our competing interests.
We have about a minute left, Governor, but in the event that the tax measure falls short, what options are left beyond cutting?
Well, you know, you got two problems. One is the shortfall of state general fund for next fiscal year, the year that starts July 1st of 2017. That shortfall is about $440 million. Obviously, we need to craft a budget that maintains our critical investments in the priorities, whether it's higher education, TOPS, healthcare, you name it. The bigger problem is July 1st, 2018, and we would have to have a special session before then. We can't just allow $1.3 billion of revenue to evaporate on us.
Thank you, Governor John Bel Edwards. He'll be back again next month.
Thank you, Jim.
And it's a pleasure visiting with folks from throughout our state. Until next time, for Michelle Southern, I'm Jim Inkster. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned.